Hare Krishna, dear devotees. Please accept my humble obeisances. Before we read Srimad Bhagavatam, let's invoke the blessing of the Lord. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjanishalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Nama Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhaiva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Ishvara Parama Krishnaha Satchidananda Vigraha Anadiradir Govindaha Sarvakaran Karanam. जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैता गदाधर शिवासदि गौर भक्तगण हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे. Dear devotees, we have been reading Srimad Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srila Vyasadeva ki jai. And we are on the first canto, second chapter, and then today's verses, starting from verse number 9. धर्मस्य हि अपवर्गस्य नार्थो अर्थयोपकल्पते नर्थस्य धर्मकान्तस्य कामो लाभाय हि स्मृतः. Dharmasya, occupational engagements. He, certainly. Apvargasya, ultimate liberation. Na, not. Arthaha, and. Arthaya, for material gain. Upakalpate is meant for. Na, neither. Arthasya, of material gain. Dharma eka antasya, for one who is engaged in ultimate occupational service. Kamaha, sense gratification. Labhaya, attainment of it. He, exactly. Smritaha is described by great sages. Translation. All occupational engagements are certainly meant for ultimate liberation. They should never be performed for material gain. Furthermore, according to sages, one who is engaged in the ultimate occupational service should never use material gain to cultivate sense gratification. Purport. We have already discussed that pure devotional service to the Lord is automatically followed by perfect knowledge and detachment from material existence. But there are others who consider that all kinds of different occupational engagements, including those of religion, are meant for material gain. The general tendency of any ordinary man in any part of the world is to gain some material profit in exchange for religious or any other occupational service. Even in the Vedic literature, for all sorts of religious performances, an allurement of material gain is offered, and most people are attracted by such allurements or blessings of religiosity. Why are such so-called men of religion allured by material gain? Because material gain can enable one to fulfill desires, which in turn satisfies sense gratification. The cycle of occupational engagements includes so-called religiosity, followed by material gain, and material gain followed by fulfillment of desires. Sense gratification is the general way for all sorts of fully occupied men. But in the statement of Sutta Goswami, as per the verdict of Srimad Bhagavatam, this is nullified by the present shloka. One should not engage himself in any sort of occupational service for material gain only, nor should material gain be utilized for sense gratification. How material gain should be utilized is described as follows. Next, verse number 10. Kamasya indriya priti labho jiveta yavatah jivasya tattva jigyasa nartho yaschesa karmabhihi. Kamasya of desires, na not, indriya senses, pritihi satisfaction, labha gain, jiveta self preservation, yavata so much so, jivasya of living being, tattva the absolute truth, jignasa inquiries, na not, arthaha and, yah cha iha whatsoever else, karmabhihi by occupational activities. Translation: Life's desires should never be directed towards sense gratification. One should desire only a healthy life or self preservation. Since a human being is meant for inquiry about the absolute truth, nothing else should be the goal of one's works. Purport: The completely bewildered material civilization is wrongly directed towards the fulfillment of desires in sense gratification. In such civilization, in all spheres of life, the ultimate end is sense gratification. In politics, social service, altruism, philanthropy, and ultimately in religion or even in salvation, the very same tint of sense gratification is ever increasingly predominant. In the political field, the leaders of man fight with one another to fulfill their personal sense gratification. The voters adore the so called leaders only when they promise sense gratification. As soon as voters are dissatisfied in their own sense satisfaction, they dethrone the leaders. The leaders must always disappoint the voters by not satisfying their senses. The same is applicable in all other fields. No one is serious about the problems of life. Even those who are on the path of salvation desire to become one with absolute truth and desire to commit spiritual suicide for sense gratification. But the Bhagavatam says that one should not live for sense gratification. One should satisfy the senses only in so much as required for sense preservation and not for sense gratification. Because the body is made of senses, which also require a certain amount of satisfaction. There are regulative direction for satisfaction of senses, but the senses are not meant for unrestricted enjoyment. For example, marriage or combination of a man with a woman is necessary for progeny, but it is not meant for sense enjoyment. In the absence of voluntary restraint, there is a propaganda for family planning. But foolish men do not know that family planning is automatically executed as soon as there is a search after the absolute truth. Seekers of absolute truth are never allured by unnecessary engagements in sense gratification, because the serious students seeking the absolute truth are always overwhelmed with the work of researching the truth. In every sphere of life, therefore, ultimate end must be seeking after absolute truth. And that sort of engagement will make one happy because he will be less engaged in varieties of sense gratification. And what that absolute truth is explained as follows. Next verse, verse 11. वदन्ति तत्त्वतत्त्वविदस् तत्त्वं यज्ञानम् अद्वयम् ब्रह्मेति परमात्मेति भगवानिति शब्द्यते. Vadanti, they say, that that Tattvavidaha, the learned souls, Tattvam, the absolute truth, Yat, which, Jnanam, knowledge, Advayam, non-dual, Brahma iti, known as Brahman, Paramatma iti, known as Paramatma, Bhagwan iti, known as Bhagwan, Shabdyate, it so sounded. Translation: learned transcendentalists who know the absolute truth call this non-dual substance Brahman, Paramatma, or Bhagwan. Purport: the absolute truth is both subject and object, and there is no qualitative difference there. Therefore, Brahman, Paramatma, Bhagavan are qualitatively one and the same. The same substance is realized as impersonal Brahman by the students of the Upanishads, as localized Paramatma by Hiranyagarbhas or the yogis, and as Bhagavan by the devotees. In other words, Bhagavan or the personality of Godhead is the last word of the absolute truth. Paramatma is the partial representation of the personality of Godhead, and impersonal Brahman is the glowing effulgence of the personality of Godhead. As the sun rays are to sun god, less intelligent students of either of above school sometimes argue in favor of their own respective realization. But those who are perfect seers of absolute truth know well that above three features of the one absolute truth are different perspective views seen from different angles of vision. As it is explained in the first shloka of the first chapter of Bhagavatam, absolute truth is self sufficient, cognizant, free from the illusion of relativity. In the relative world, the knower is different from the known. But in absolute truth, both knower and known are one and the same thing. In relative world, the knower is the living spirit or superior energy, whereas known is inert matter or inferior energy. Therefore, there is a duality of inferior and superior energy. Whereas in absolute realm, both knower and known are of same superior energy. There are three kinds of energy of the supreme energetic. There is no difference between energy and energetic, but there is a difference of quality of energies. The absolute realm and the living entities are of same superior energy, but the material world is inferior energy. The living being in contact with the inferior energy is illusioned, thinking he belongs to the inferior energy. Therefore, there is the sense relativity. Therefore, there is the sense of relativity in the material world. In absolute, there is no such sense of difference between knower and the known, and therefore everything there is absolute. Next, verse number 12. तक्षद्धाना मुनयो ज्ञानवैराग्ययुक्तयः पश्यन्ति आत्मनि चात्मनमम् भक्त्या श्रुता गृहीतयः tat that Shraddhana seriously inquisitive, Munaya sages, Jnanaha knowledge, Vairagya detachment, Yuktaya well equipped with, Pashyanti see, Atmani within himself, Cha and Atmanam the Paramatma, Bhaktya in devotional service, Shruta the Vedas, Grihitya well received. Translation: the seriously inquisitive student or sage, well equipped with knowledge and detachment, realizes that absolute truth by rendering devotional service in terms of what he has heard from the Vedanta Shruti. The absolute truth is realized in full by the process of devotional service to the Lord, Vasudeva, or the personality of Godhead, who is the full fledged absolute truth. Brahman is his transcendental bodily effulgence, and Paramatma is his partial representation. As such, Brahman or Paramatma, a realization of absolute truth, is but a partial realization. There are four different types of human beings: the karmis, the jnanis, the yogis, and the devotees. The karmis are materialistic, whereas the other three are transcendental. The first class transcendentalists are devotees who have realized the Supreme Person. The second class transcendentalists are those who have partially realized the plenary portion of the Absolute Person. And the third class transcendentalists are those who have barely realized spiritual focus of the Absolute Person. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita and other Vedic literatures, the Supreme Person is realized by devotional service, which is backed by full knowledge and detachment from material association. We have already discussed the point that devotional service is followed by knowledge and detachment from material association. As Brahman and Paramatma realization are imperfect realizations of absolute truth, so the means of realizing Brahman and Paramatma, that is, the paths of jnana and yoga, are also imperfect means of realizing the absolute truth. Devotional service, which is based on the foreground of full knowledge combined with detachment from material association, and which is fixed by oral reception of Vedanta Shruti, is only perfect method by which seriously inquisitive student can realize the absolute truth. Devotional service is not, therefore, meant for the less intelligent class of transcendentalists. There are three classes of devotees, namely first, second, and third. The third class devotees or neophytes who have no knowledge and are not detached from material association, but who are simply attracted by the preliminary process of worshipping the deity in the temple, are called material devotees. Material devotees are more attached to material benefit than transcendental profit. Therefore, one has to make definitive progress from the position of material devotional service to the second class devotional position. In the second class position, the devotee can see four principles in the devotional line, namely the personality of Godhead, his devotees, the ignorant, and the envious. One has to raise himself at least to the stage of second class devotee and thus become eligible to know the absolute truth. A third class devotee therefore has to receive the instructions of devotional service from the authoritative sources of Bhagavata. The number one Bhagavata is the established personality of devotee. Another Bhagavatam is the message of Godhead. The third class devotee therefore has to go to personality of devotee in order to learn the instructions of devotional service. Such a personality or devotee is not a professional man who earns his livelihood by the business of Bhagavatam. Such a devotee must be a representative of Sukadev Goswami, like Suta Goswami, and must preach the cult of devotional service for all around benefit of all people. A neophyte devotee has very little taste for hearing from the authorities. Such a neophyte devotee makes a show of hearing from professional man to satisfy his senses. This sort of hearing and chanting has spoiled the whole thing, so one should be very careful about the faulty process. The holy messages of Godhead, as inculcated in the Bhagavad Gita or in Srimad Bhagavatam, are undoubtedly transcendental subjects. But even though they are so, such transcendental matters are not to be received from professional man, who spoils them as the serpent spoils milk simply by the touch of his tongue. A sincere devotee must therefore be prepared to hear the Vedic literature like Upanishads, Vedantas, and other literatures left by previous authorities or Goswamis for the benefit of his progress. Without hearing such literatures, one cannot make actual progress. And without hearing and following the instructions, the show of devotional service becomes worthless and therefore a sort of disturbance in the path of devotional service. Unless, therefore, devotional service is established on the principles of Shruti, Smriti, Purana, or Pancharatra authorities, the make show of devotional service should at once be rejected. An unauthorized devotee should never be recognized as a pure devotee. By assimilation of such messages from Vedic literatures, one can see all pervading localized aspect of the personality of Godhead within his own self constantly. This is called Samadhi. Next, verse 13. अथा पुंभिर्द्विजा श्रेष्ठ वर्णाश्रमविभागशः स्वानुस्थितस्य धर्मस्य संसिद्धिर्हरितोषणम्. Ataha. So, Pumbhi by the human being. Dvija Shreshtaha, O best among the twice born. Varna Ashrama, the institution of four castes and four orders of life. Vibhagashaha, by division of. Swanustistasya, of one's own prescribed duties. Dharmasya, occupational. Samsiddhihi, the highest perfection. Hari, the personality of Godhead. Toshanam, pleasing. Translation. O best among twice born. It is therefore concluded that the highest perfection one can achieve by discharging the duties prescribed for one's own occupation according to caste divisions and orders of life is to please the personality of Godhead. Purport. Human society all over the world is divided into four castes and four orders of life. The four castes are the intelligent caste, the martial caste, the productive caste, and the liberal caste. These castes are classified in terms of one's work and qualification and not by birth. Then again, there are four orders of life, namely student life, the householder life, the retired, and the devotional life. In the best interest of human society, there must be such divisions of life. Otherwise, no social institution can grow in a healthy state. And in each and every one of the above mentioned divisions of life, the aim must be to please the supreme authority of personality of Godhead. This institutional function of human society is known as the system of one ashrama dharma, which is quite natural for the civilized life. The Varna Ashrama institution is constructed to enable one to realize the absolute truth. It is not for artificial dominion of one division on over another. When the aim of life, that is the realization of absolute truth, is missed by too much attachment for indriya priti or sense gratification, As already discussed herein before, the institution of Varnashrama is utilized by selfish men to pose an artificial predominance over the weaker section. In the Kali Yuga or in the age of quarrel, this artificial predominance is already current, but the saner section of the people know it well that the divisions of caste and orders of life are meant for smooth social intercourse and high thinking self realization and not for any other purpose. Herein, the statement of Bhagavatam is that the highest aim of life or the highest perfection of the institution of Varna, Ashrama, Dharma is to cooperate jointly for the satisfaction of the Supreme Lord. This is also confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 4 and verse 13. So let's do one more and then we'll end. Number 14. तस्मादेकेन मनसा भगवान् सात्वतां पतिः श्रोतव्य कीर्तितव्यस्य ध्येया पूज्यस च नित्यदः tasmad therefore ekena by one manasa attention of mind bhagavan the personality of godhead satvatam of devotees patihi protector shrutavya is to be heard krititavya to be glorified cha and dheya to be remembered pujya to be worshipped cha and nityada constantly. Translation. Therefore, with one pointed attention, one should constantly hear about, glorify, remember, and worship the personality of Godhead, who is the protector of the devotees. Purport. If realization of absolute truth is the ultimate aim of life, it must be carried out by all the means. In any one of the above mentioned caste and orders of life, the four processes, namely glorifying, hearing, remembering, and worshipping, are general occupations. Without these principles of life, no one can exist. Activities of the living being involve engagement in these four different principles of life. Especially in modern society, all activities are more or less dependent on hearing and glorifying. Any man from any social status becomes a well known man in human society within a very short time if he is simply glorified truly or falsely in the daily newspapers. Sometimes political leaders of a particular party are also advertised by newspaper propaganda, and by such method of glorification, an insignificant man becomes an important man within no time. But such propaganda by false glorification of a of an unqualified person cannot bring about any good, either for the particular man or for the society. There may be some temporary reactions to such propaganda, but there are no permanent effects. Therefore, such activities are a waste of time. The actual object of glorification is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who has created everything manifested before us. We have broadly discussed this fact from the beginning of the Janmadi Asya Shloka of this Bhagavatam. The tendency to glorify others or hear others must be turned to the real object of glorification, the Supreme Being, and that will bring happiness. So we'll stop here. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srila Vyasadeva ki jai. Anybody has any question, correction, chastisement, any realization? Okay, all right. So if there's no question, we'll wrap up and continue chanting. Vancha kalpatarubhyasya kripa sindhu bhayucha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namah. Anand Koti Vaishnavi ki jai. Thank you, dear devotees, for listening to me, and please forgive me if I have not read properly. So now we'll stop here and continue